Theodore Roosevelt once said, "The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena,
I believe there's a hero in all of us.
so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat,
Seize the day.
whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who knows the great enthusiasms, the great devotions, and spends himself in a worthy cause,
And I'm gonna stay right here and fight for this lost cause.
who at best, if he wins, knows the thrills of high achievement, and if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly."
I'm gonna show you how great I am.
The radio station that dominated rock music through much of the 60s and 70s stopped the music today and started a new format of news and talk. The change at WABC is part of a much wider readjustment of programming choices on AM and FM radio.
Since 1960, since the days of the Silver Dollar Survey through the height of the Top 40 format, WABC Radio had been a rock and roll giant. Ron Lundy and Dan Ingram have a total of 38 years in front of the microphone. Today, they counted down the final minutes of their final show together.
Well, so be it. It's all over.
Their thoughts were their own at that moment. The two veteran disc jockeys brought a radio era to life, and they put it to rest. AM radio is being forced to change because of its younger brother, FM.
What station were you listening to?
101 FM.
FM. Do you listen to FM a lot?
Quite a bit of the time, yeah. Unless I'm on news or traffic reports, then I'm on AM.
So you turn to AM for information?
Right.
There is only one Top 40 station left on the AM band in New York.
WNBC coming up.
Radio insiders analyze WNBC's unique position as precarious, and NBC program officials are planning stereo broadcasts late this summer in order to compete with the better sound quality of FM. They're forced to innovate to survive.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome, New York, to Talk Radio 77.
WABC started its all-talk format after a new newscast today. The old sound is gone, and so are some of the old voices.
I don't think that it'll ever be another radio station that will come close to being as big as we were.
There are so many people of a certain generation who believe that the day the music died was the day that a plane crash occurred, and it took the Big Bopper, Ritchie Valens, and, of course, Buddy Holly to their deaths. That was, of course, the day the music died for some. But for me and so many others in a certain generation, May 5th of 1982, that was the day the music died. That was the day that WABC stopped playing music. And I was a kid. I grew up with WABC. That was the station to listen to every single day. And when the music stopped there, we didn't know where the hell to go. But little did we know that that was simply the beginning of a trend, because at that time the music was dying, certainly on AM. It moved to FM. Now it's even dying on FM. And this is one of those great conversations that I've had so many times with friends of mine. What happened to radio? Who killed radio? Who killed what is AM radio, what is now FM radio? And will we ever get back to where we were? I don't think so. But it's a great conversation to have, because you need to have it not with the consulting experts, but rather have it with the people who have lived radio and the people who have been there. And I'm happy to finally get a chance to talk about that with some of the, and one of the individuals here that you see said, please don't call me a legend. Okay, well, maybe we'll call everybody veterans, because maybe that's even better. So let me introduce the people that I've had the opportunity to bring along today. First of all, let me introduce, he started as a radio guy when he was 14 years old, hosted shows in Miami, Las Vegas, Seattle, Los Angeles. Was an actor in Miami, film, stage, television, heard on NBC Sports Radio. And it's always nice to know that he's got the bed handy just in case, so that if we really bore him, he can go ahead and take a nap. I listened to this guy in Miami for years, and he certainly is, I don't care what he says, he certainly is a legend as far as I'm concerned. Dave Caprita. Dave, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for being part of something that I hope I can contribute to with my limited knowledge. Yeah.
No, that's all right. Corey said you could, so if you can't, you're in big trouble. I'll get to him in just a moment. Let me go ahead and introduce next. He has been a political commentator in Tampa, also for CNN. He has worked on radio in Tampa. He has been around in this business like we all have for a very long time. And if you'll recognize the last name, his father was Dan Ingram, who you heard there and you heard mentioned on that report for WABC, and the guy that I simply listen to all the time. So he has got to have a tremendous amount of stories, certainly at least from his book, which we won't let him get away from talking about a little bit later on. It's a pleasure to welcome Chris Ingram to the show today. Chris, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Ed. It's a pleasure to be here. Among the real legends, I don't know what I'm doing here. I must have taken the wrong turn.
And finally, let me introduce a great friend of mine. We have known each other, I don't know, since I think the 1800s, although I believe he was there when Marconi started, and maybe I was there as well, because we've all been around.
When he laid the cable.
He is one of the greatest creative voices that I have ever heard, and so many others have heard. He has done so many radio commercials. He has been a producer, an engineer. He's been a marvelous actor on films like Analyze This, The Truman Show. He has been on theater. He's been on Burn Notice in television. He has been a driving force with SAG-AFTRA, with the union, and protecting a lot of the performers that need it every single day from the unscrupulous side of this business. And boy, I'll tell you, there's stories right in there. We welcome Dave Corey to the show. Mr. Corey, a pleasure, sir. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much, Ed. It's really, this is going to be fun. Can't wait to ride it.
Let's hope so, because we have so much material to work from. So I'm going to start out, first of all, with everybody here, because we've all been in the business for a tremendous amount of time. And we have all seen the changes, and we have all watched as corporates have changed, and playlists have changed, and public mores have changed, society has changed, music tastes have changed. Shortly, if you will, Dave Corey, let me get back to you first of all. Give us all a little bit on how you got started and some of the things that you've seen recently in radio.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really quite interesting. The genesis of my particular career is it's funny where fate takes you. As a kid, we moved a lot, and it wasn't just from one part of New Jersey to another part of New Jersey. It was usually coast to coast. I was born in San Jose, California. Before I was 3 years old, we moved to Pennsylvania. Then we're back to California. Then we're to New Jersey. And it was through my whole life, right up through high school, that every 2, 3, 4 years we were going to move. And what I discovered after a while is I didn't want to make friends because I would have to say goodbye to them. I knew that would be my fate. So I said to my folks, you know, if you want to get me something for Christmas, get me a full-length mirror in the house, and get me a tape recorder so I can make stupid faces in the mirror, and I can do stupid stuff with the tape recorder. So I had reels and reels of burps, reels and reels of farts. That I would do. And so those were my formative years. But I spent a lot of time in New Jersey, too, listening to the likes of Dan Ingram and Gene Shepard. And occasionally I'd be able to, on my rocket radio, pick up Cousin Brucey and some of those guys. And yeah, I really aspired to that. And when I got to the University of New Hampshire, they had a terrific radio station there. And learned from the ground up. You know, we basically had an advisor, and he said, here's the beautiful facilities. You guys just go nuts. And that was how it began. And it took me to Armed Forces Radio. And then it took me to Manchester, New Hampshire. Concord, New Hampshire was my first station, where we played every record that was sent to us. You know, you get the shipload of 45s, and every single record was played. You know, Kites Are Fun and all that kind of crap. And I did a swap shop and exercised some improv on that, much to the chagrin of the conservative general manager. Became eventually program director at WFEA in Manchester, New Hampshire, a rock station, and for the first time in the history of RKO, some little station in Manchester was actually beating them in our market. So I think they wanted to see me out of town. So I applied there. There was an opening. I think Dale Dorman was leaving or something like that. And they said, sorry, we're hiring from within. But we got a station down in Miami that's looking for a production guy. So why don't you go down there? And that was Waxy with Rick Shaw. And that's where I did production. And then I became Dr. Dave in the mornings. And then I got bounced around. And I don't know. I somehow got here through without ever leaving Miami. You know, I wasn't as itinerant as some of my brothers and sisters.
Well, I think that's all happened.
That's basically
we've all bounced around. I mean, that's the one thing that we can say about all of us, because people start to look at our resumes, and one of the first things that someone said to me, "Can't you hold a job?" I said, work in radio and TV sometimes, because that's all we do. I mean, we continue to move around constantly. Dave Caprita is back, and he joins us. Dave, it's nice to see you back once again, because as a matter of fact, I'm going to go to you now, right, Dave? Because I want you to give us a little idea how you got started in this insane business, and if you were dragged willingly. Sometimes I believe that maybe we need to be dragged by our heels sometimes to be in this business when everything begins.
Oh, it was definitely willingly. My brother, who was 8 years older than me, at the ripe age of 18, he became the manager of a little radio station in Pensacola, Florida. And I was like literally 13 years old, the summer of 67. And despite the protestations of his boss and all the other DJs, he gave me a shift. So the first time I was on the radio, and I eagerly jumped for it, but it was one of those things where I was like such a shy kid that I could hardly speak out when somebody said hello to me. So everybody thought it was really weird that this diffident kid who was so shy that he couldn't speak wanted to be a DJ. But I jumped into it with both feet, destroyed myself on my first show. But once I got the taste of it, as I got into college and then left college, I actually was a few months away from graduating to get my music degree, and I quit because I wanted to be a DJ. So I would say I didn't get drafted. I pretty much threw myself into it, for better or worse.
Yeah.
And
did you ever use the word Did you ever use the word diffident on the air? Just curious.
Only with you. I think it was the summer of 1979 was the first time I ever used the word diffident on the radio.
Yeah, we have to all say this, that in many of our careers, using the word diffident on the air, you would have at least 100% of the listeners go, "What'd he say? Did he just curse?"
Either that, or you would either have the listeners saying that, or you would definitely have a consultant after the show. Don't use words like that, because the listeners are too stupid. And that's, I'm sure we'll get into that later. Yes. But I think, since the theme is what the hell happened to radio, I think, and I mean, even consultants who still to this day hate my guts because I used to throw the crap back at them when they would give me ridiculous advice, things like that. I was totally cured of consultants when I started working with Neil Rogers, because he completely threw the Bible out the window. And ever since then, I never did look back. I probably still have enemies to this day in the consultant world, because I never showed them any respect, which was probably a bad thing.
Well, but
because they were
have to
trying
admit
to
something,
do their
though,
job.
and we will talk about consultants, but consultants didn't earn any respect from the people who were on the air, because we were nothing more than their play toys to basically throw in the mud and squish with their heels. But we'll get into them momentarily. Chris, as the son of a legend in New York, was it set in stone that you would get involved somehow in this business, whether it's television, radio, anything whatsoever? Or were you the combative kid that said, no, please don't make me get in front of the microphone, Dad. I don't want to have to do this for a living.
Well, I'll tell you, I was born a radio vagabond. We were born wherever we would, put down roots for a year. We had a few kids up in New York, on Long Island. I think we had my brother Dan in Dallas. My twin brother and I were born in St. Louis. So I grew up with a blended family of 8 kids. And out of those 8, you figure somebody had to be stupid enough to follow him into the business. And I was always fascinated by it. I mean, I used to he had this big old studio at home, and my dad would, and I'd kind of peek around the corner and watch him doing his work, and he taught me to edit tape on his knee when I was about, I don't know, 8 or 9. Put the cans on my head and ran the music through an echo chamber, which was the same one they had at WABC. And that was the first time I ever felt drunk. I was like, wow. And I was absolutely just, I don't know if I was born to it, but I was absolutely amazed by the business. I used to go in and watch him do the show. He put me on the air once. Hi, my name's Chris Ingram. Doing the Dan Ingram show today. Some silly stuff like that. Yeah. Wow. So for me, it was sort of a thing. The one thing I did do, I got into news. I wasn't going to be copying my father, so I got into news. Worked in Boston news radio.
Why not? But wait a minute. But why not? I mean, your dad was such a glib entertainer. What was it that said to you, okay, the difference is I've got to be the news guy instead?
Well, Dad always also said something else. He always said, the next anybody is nobody. And I didn't want to get into the business trying to be the next my father. And I also was stupid enough to think I shouldn't try to ride his coattails or use his name. So it took a while to get a job. But I actually walked in and got a job at a news radio station as an intern and was an executive editor within 2 weeks, even though I didn't have a college degree or certainly any journalism background. And I just clawed my way up from there. CBS News in New York. Then decided to be a DJ because I said, you know what, I do want to be a jock. And so I got a job in, I was in the Catskills at WVOS FM where I took over mornings and the station went from dog last to #1 in the market, just by not being the next Dan Ingram, but having that kind of a sense that sort of anything goes. And luckily I had a GM who was, okay with that because the numbers were good, and she could sell the station for a change. And, that's what we're lacking now. We're lacking owners and management who has faith, any kind of faith in the talent these days.
See,
and that's it's one of those things that are just crushing us.
I think you nailed that right off the top here, because there is an inherent talent that used to be involved in radio, where the first time someone would sit down in front of that control panel, you had an idea where you were going. You had an imagination. You were pushed to have that imagination. I remember the very first place I went, and my first job didn't last long at all because, as I said to Chris off the air, I wanted to be the next Dan Ingram. I really did. I emulated him, but unfortunately, the radio station I worked for was owned by a Christian broadcasting company and a Christian family, and they wanted to do top 40. So here I am doing 6 to 10 in the morning. I'm doing top 40. And I swear to you that 20 minutes into my first shift, the owner comes in and says, "We don't do that stuff here, boy." And I said, "What? This is fun. This is rock and roll. I mean, that's what this is supposed to be." But you had people who didn't have a tremendous amount of experience. They had faith from the management there, and I think management wanted to groom them and wanted us to be good. Correct me if I'm wrong here, but there was a time, magically, when management was behind us.
Mm-hmm. I mean, if you had numbers or if you showed that you were entertaining your audience and you would listen to a little bit of direction, not a whole, but not the kind of stuff you're seeing today, they were happy to mentor you or let you find a mentor and let you grow. And that would find, now these days, guys my age are doing weekends. Well, where are the teenagers doing weekends that we grew up seeing when we were kids? We were teenagers working, learning the craft. And now it's because of what's going on in the industry, it's us scraping for anything I can get, being grateful for a weekend gig at $15 an hour.
Mm.
Now,
that's such a sad state
a word
of
in there,
affairs.
and I want to go to Dave Corey on this one, because Dave, you have been in so many different places between theater and film and TV and production and so many things you've done. The word is craft. And I think what we're missing here in radio, certainly terrestrial radio, and that's what we're going to focus on here today, is terrestrial radio. Because satellite radio is the playing of music and the rebroadcast of syndicated shows and is not really, and again, I'm going to take a lot of heat for this from friends, but I don't consider it a craft when you're playing pre-programmed music that comes in packets and you're hitting the computer and it's button clicking. And yeah, you have Nina Blackwood and some of the old VJs that are in there, but all they're doing is spitting out liner notes. It's not a craft. Is it not fair to say, Dave, that what we're talking about here is a craft that has completely disappeared?
I couldn't agree with you more in that regard. So many of us came along as basically artistic individuals that were looking for a place to exercise our craft. We had pretty facile brains there that would be able to. And one of the people I really credit for this in this market is Kimba. She was a perfect example of having a joke or a story in the news, and somebody would go for the obvious punchline. But then there were those of us, and this is where I credit Kimba so much too, is that she would just push that obvious punchline aside and just mine for gold, go deeper, deeper, and deeper to the point where people would hear it and they go, and then all of a sudden they go, oh my God, that's brilliant, you know? And so I think that's where a lot of us came from. You know, the joke that I was talking to Dave Caprita about there at Waxy, I think it was actually my demise was, I had recently come from New Hampshire and was doing a morning show, and that was the day Flipper died. And I didn't realize what an institution Flipper was in the area, you know. So the next day I did a little bit where I had wave noises in the background, and I had little dolphin noises, you know, that kind of thing going on. And so then I got very low and I said, ladies and gentlemen, we now take you to Key Biscayne for the last rites for Flipper. And I see the dolphins are now lining up for a 21 blowhole salute. And at that point, I had a cacophony of fart noises that just, you know, and I was called into the office after that. But still, you kind of stuff. I remember up in New Hampshire in the early 70s, it was a French-Canadian, Manchester was French-Canadian. And there was this big story of how one of the television stations was going to take programs that were broadcast in English and translate them into French. And so they'd be broadcasting them in French. So I did a takeoff on Marcus Welby, MD, at the time. And the whole thing was called L'Enema avec le clean air de vacuum. So you can imagine that. But,
that's imaginative.
Those were the,
that's creative. That's a joke. That's having fun with an audience.
And I would have program directors, and I was there myself, where I told the management, I said, you take care of the bucks and you take care of the salespeople. I literally, when I became program director, I drew a line on the between the studios and between the offices, and I said, if you cannot cross this line. You cannot call talent on the air and bother them like, what the hell is that record? And, you know, all the bullshit you do. And I said, if you got money for a promotion, throw it over that line and I'll take care of it. Don't tell me what to do with it. And sure enough, I was doing the morning show and at the PD at the same time. And the GM called up and asked me what the hell that record was I was playing. I said, well, at that time, it was a 45. I said, it's the last one you're going to hear from me today. I hope you got somebody to take over for me, because I let it run out, walked out of the studio, went up to Dirty Earl's up the street, had some fried clams, and you know, and I think they got the message. And that's the kind of program director I've had the honor of working with, the Rob Sidneys of the world, probably one of the best program directors. Rick Shaw, he incorporated into my brain, and you know, when I would do bits, he says, don't forget, you know, we're 100,000 watts or whatever there was, music, music, music. So if you got something to do, make it short, make it 30 seconds tops. It has to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Boom. And I said, don't worry, man, that's my fort. Until I did the blowhole salute. So
don't worry, you made the blowhole work. It was perfect. I'm Ed Berliner, and this is The Man in the Arena. I'm with Dave Corey, Dave Caprita, and also with Chris Ingram as we discuss the state of radio, amongst other things. So then, Dave Caprita, where did we lose the entertainment side of things here? Because Chris's dad was very much an entertainer. Dave Corey's talking about being an entertainer. You certainly were on your time where you had fun with it. When I did jock and then also did sports talk for a lot of years. Even when I was doing news, I would drop in a lot of double entendres, have some fun with it. When did we lose that, and why did we lose that?
Well, once again, and you're probably going to want to save this for later in the show, I think just corporate America. People don't trust creativity. I mean, you find it in some radio stations still to this day that have the balls to allow people to do what they want. But I think as the years went by and people trying to make money that to cover their butts, you see radio stations spending hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, putting people in a small room and playing like 10-second snippets of a piece of a song. And like, do you like that or do you not like that? You know, which is one of the most ludicrous ways to find out what it's like, showing Mona Lisas and Monets and everything, and like a flash for 1 second on the screen going, did you like that? And so you had that, and then you had consultants telling people what to do instead of hiring people on their own merits. And when people hired me, whether it was Rick Shaw at Waxy or Rick Peters at Love 94, or when I moved out to the West Coast, I tried to let them know what they were getting, that I was not going to be obscene or obnoxious to the best of my ability, but I was going to be me. And me is kind of like a wearing your heart and your personal life on your sleeve. I mean, some of the best comments I ever got from listeners was like, what you said about your cat magic or what your wife did to you the other day. I mean, the listeners loved that. But consultants always felt like, don't make it about yourself. Don't try to be too funny. And it was just so for me personally.
Which is the key to relating to someone, is being personal and letting someone in. That's what we do in shows like this in many ways, and that's what people want to do. And I think go to consultants. Go right there. Let's go there, because we may as well, because between consultants and management and ownership, we've got some depth and breadth to discuss here, because the consultants who were brought in to discuss radio had no experience on the air, had never programmed a radio station in their life, were mostly salespeople, were people who just sat there and watched trends and looked at ratings. Chris, I got to tell you, when your dad was sitting there spinning records and going off on great tangents on WABC, I can't imagine for 1 minute that anybody came in and said, you know, Dan, you shouldn't talk about a record like that, and don't make heavy breathing noises when Barry White comes on. Which he did, and which still lives with me as one of the great moments. I can't believe anybody came in and said, stop doing it.
The closest was the Castro convertible commercials, where he said, we now have Ottomans that turn into entire empires and stuff like that. And Dad lived these live breeds. And, I think it was Rick Sklar said, hey, you got to knock this off. But then Castro called and said, I love what you're doing. Keep doing it. So that qualified. But I mean, the things with these consultants is they are afraid to hear anything they didn't expect. They think they have to know what's going to happen on the air before it happens, because they're so afraid. They have such little faith in us as performers that it scares them to death that we might say something that they didn't expect, and then they gotta somehow deal with the mess. And yeah, sometimes people do go out off the reservation. Okay, but for the most part, if you want a really thriving community of radio, you got to have people willing to take chances, willing to be themselves, as you said, Dave, and just being willing and open to letting themselves out there and knowing the line. And that's you get that with consultants.
That's such a good point about the commercials. I just, in my brain, I can remember two from Boston. Jess Kane used to do on BZ, I believe it was. He used to do commercials for Kane Relish. And he got on the air one day and he says, Kane's, you're relish shit. Like that. And then Dale Dorman used to do Mrs. Paul's fish sticks. And he goes, Mrs. Paul's fish sticks, they're quick and easy, just like Mrs. Paul herself. And I bought the Kane's Relish. I bought the Mrs. Paul's fish sticks, and meantime, I can just picture the management coming down. How dare you say that on the road? Yeah. Yeah. And the definition of a consultant, by the way, I'm sure you've heard it before. It's a shit salesman with a mouthful of samples.
Perfectly well put. Now that we've gone ahead and got after the consultants, but then again, as I noted in the early stages of this show, they deserve it, quite frankly. I mean, there are consultants out there who are good at their job, but in the time that we're talking about, the consultants didn't care. They spit all over. They treated the talent as if the talent was nothing more than roaches on the bottom of their shoe. And they treated us as if we didn't know anything at all about what we were doing. Yet we were the ones who had the direct connection with the fans at all times. We were the ones answering the phones. I was the guy on the sports talk shows and on the news talk shows, sports talk, a lot of my early stages, who was sitting there talking to people. Dave and Chris and all of us, we're the ones who answered the phones and got on the air with these people. We knew what was coming back, and we could make sense of it, and then we could entertain. And I don't want to go any farther without at least taking a couple of moments here to, having discussed what Dan Ingram did on the air, to at least have a couple of moments, and this, I'll be honest, this is a personal moment for me because I absolutely worship the man and what he did and listen to Dan Ingram every single day on 77 WABC in New York.
WABC's Dan Ingram Show. So there's this old guy every once in a while. I found out that evidently he was a policeman who retired. And he gets out and he starts directing traffic, usually on 54th Street, 53rd Street, 6th, 7th Avenue, around there. Come on, you guys! Really, I mean, I want to tell you, they got to put that guy back in uniform. He may be a little cuckoo, but he gets the traffic moving, all right. He got him rolling. It was some truck, I love trucks that come across the street, all the jockeying back and forth. They can't go anywhere, and the guys are blowing their horns. He walks up and says, "Move that vehicle!" Guys, yes, sir. Right out of the way. Away they went. Traffic opened up. It was fantastic.
WABC.
Major Harris. You did? How did you make it? Listen, Encore, love won't let me wait. He's here with a lady with a heavy breathing and all that stuff, fogging up my control room window. 6 minutes past 2 on ABC and the Angry Bass. How you doing, Kimasabi?
WABC.
Thank you, my dear. She said it before I asked the question, but the question was 5 hours ago to Jacqueline Maher. I wonder if that's relation to John Maher. No, he spells his name meager and pronounces it Maher. This is Jacqueline Maher, spelled Maher. Anyway, she said, we're at WABC, we say what station you listen to, and that answer is going to keep on earning her. Are you ready for this? She is going to, would you answer it again, dear? Just tell me, what is your radio station, my dear? That's very good. That answer is going to keep getting her that 6% on $1 million computed hourly until we find another WABC down piano. WABC, listen, say it. When I say roll it under, I mean under, not over. I just had a piano rolled over me. It was fun. Anyway, we find another WABC listener our daily secrets of 14 random calls. We have a lot of reading to do here. Increase your chances of being called by mailing your name, address, and phone number to Winter Box 77, New York 10019, or hang around in the right bars and meet the PD, and, you may get a better chance. And so we leave another program of young Beethoven. When we last left little Ludwig, he was trying to finish his fifth. He has now finished it and is lying in a stupor on the floor. We'll check it out again tomorrow, gang, on Young Beethoven, starring Barry Manilow in the title role.
WABC.
Oh, my God.
It's classic. It's fun. I mean, the stuff that he said. But here's the thing. And first of all, and Chris knows this. I mean, one of his great lines was, "How you doing, Kemosabe?" You would not be able to use that word on the air today. You couldn't get away with it. I really don't think somebody would get in a snit about using it. The Major Harris line was a great bit where he just used it. The bit about Barry Manilow, there's no fun anymore, damn it, on radio. And okay, so then let's get to this. AM radio. What killed AM radio? Was it the fact that consultants didn't want any more fun and they wanted everybody to act like the same deadhead on the air? Was it management who wanted to pay as little as humanly possible and didn't really give a damn about having anything creative? Was it sales who wanted you to knuckle under and pay attention? Was it the fact that there were music playlists that weren't imaginative at all? What killed AM, or even the signal itself? Because let's go to that. There are people, and we heard it at the beginning of the show, people who said, I listen to FM. People still say, well, I went away from AM radio because it was too scratchy, I couldn't hear it, and it was way off in the distance, and FM, I got this beautiful sound. Okay, first of all, let's go to Chris Ingram. I throw it to you. What killed AM radio?
Oh, I think, frankly, the most important part is the fact of the audio quality. The music just sounds better on FM. AM these days, it's got to make a living doing something other than music, for sure. And that transition, especially in New York, with KTU, KTU going the disco route, that's when people started seeming to really care about the audio, maybe. But to me, that's primarily it. All the things you said were certainly contributing factors, but I think it simply comes down to the matter of the quality of music over FM versus AM.
Okay, Dave Caprita, you're up next. AM radio. And you spent most of your time in FM radio on Love 94 in Miami, and we can get to that because certainly things have changed there. But in your opinion, what killed AM radio?
Well, I'm going to be a little bit of the devil's advocate because I totally agree with Chris. It was definitely the quality, because you're talking about the late 60s. Technology was changing. Music was drastically changing, and people wanted to hear it, not just quality-wise, but I think in a different genre. So you had like radio stations cropping up in San Francisco and New York that were playing Jefferson Airplane and Jimi Hendrix and everything, and it just sounded so trippy, fantastic on FM instead of AM. So I think that's basically what was the death knell, was starting in the late 60s and early 70s. But having said that, I must say that I have the double album of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and one of my favorite parts of that vinyl and the movie is when KHJ comes up with that heavy compression, and it's like that driving music as they're going down the highway, and it's like you can't get that kind of compressed ass-kicking sound like you did back in those days with AM radio,
All right, we got to get you a little more center camera there, Big Boy. We don't want to lose you because we keep losing you because you're drifting. It's not quite cocktail hour yet, so you got to take it easy, okay? We don't want to lose you. We can lose you early. It's not a problem. All of a sudden, I feel like Ingram all of a sudden. Quick, stop Dave. He's over in the corner, heavy breathing. Dave Corey, then. Most of your time, of course, spent on FM in Miami. But what killed AM radio?
I'm going to have to make it unanimous. But I think it caved, and it found after it died and succumbed to FM radio, they found the easy way out. They didn't get innovative. They didn't say how can we go up against that with something other than sports and right wing talk. So they dropped the ball there. This probably would never have happened, but one of the great memories of my life was when I lived again in New Jersey, and I was a little kid, and this defines my age here, but we would sit in our Hudson Hornet on the way back from Atlantic City or something like that,
and they'd be playing. Hornet? Is that a car?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. And they'd be. Yeah, it was something else. Big hunky car, about like 5,000 pounds, and it would. Gunsmoke would be playing on the radio. I used to listen to that. They'd be playing that on AM radio. So that was even before they were doing that. Before Stan Freed or what's his name, the rock and roll. Freed.
Alan
Freed.
Alan Freed.
Alan Freed. So I mean, they were doing that
old
kind
yet,
of.
Dave. Come on, you still have your capacity. Everything's fine.
I know, but that was one of the things that I said, why couldn't they go back to, the real creative stuff, of maybe doing little, have a team of writers and put on that kind of stuff in addition to the crap that they were putting on the air. To me, it succumbed. I think the biggest problem now is what the hell happened to FM radio. And I know you're probably going to, segue into that. That is a more disgusting turn of events, I think, than what happened to AM radio. AM radio was just it was a genesis. It was evolution.
Okay,
as far as I can see. But
that's fair.
What's going on? Yeah.
Let me jump on something here before we go into FM radio, because you talked about writers and you talk about scripting. Now, Dave Corey and Dave Caprita, we both were here in the era of Neil Rogers, who was the last great daytime talk show host anywhere, local talk show host in America when it came down to entertainment. Chris, I don't know how much you had a chance to listen to Neil or catch him from Tampa, but I know that he was syndicated for a time in Tampa. But
I was in Lauderdale, not Tampa, so I would know.
Okay, yeah. Neil was brilliant. He had people who worked with him and for him, and they had bits that were created for him. They had 10-second bits, 20-second, 30-second, 60-second commercials. They had things they took off the air. They had drops from callers, such as the bridge tender, which will always go down as one of the single greatest bits of all time. But it was imaginative, it was creative. He would throw to them, he would drop in the phone callers, but he wasn't afraid to use additional material. And that was AM, everybody. That he was FM and AM, but he made his bones and made a tremendous amount of money. He was the last $1 million player that I can remember in AM radio, last $1 million host. So if we're looking to save AM radio, and again, maybe I'm just throwing it out here, and it's not worth saving. But right now, AM radio is this mindless, droning cacophony of syndicated talk shows that say the same thing over and over again, usually bad sports talk radio, bad right-wing talk radio. It's all the same thing. There's nothing local that grabs anybody. If we were, and if there was, despite the fact the sound sucks, I'll give you that. But if somebody were to come up with something creative and put it together and think about it and make it fun and make people laugh, could we save a little AM radio maybe, or are we too far gone?
I got 2 words.
Go ahead.
Yeah, 2 words for you. Those 2 words are Phil Hendry. He is, I get his podcasts and I will listen to them 5, 6, 10 times, the same ones over and over. The man is brilliant, and it drives my wife crazy because I'm in the kitchen cooking or whatever, and I got Phil Hendry blasting. That's the kind of stuff. I don't know if you're going to find talent like him anywhere.
And he was in Miami for a time. He was also in Miami.
Yes, he was. Yeah.
I worked with him. I'm sorry. I was just going to say I worked with Phil at Premier Radio in Los Angeles for a while, and because I had access to all his shows. This is statute of limitations. I would actually, and being in radio since I was a little kid, it was very unusual for me to record other people's shows. But I used to burn his funniest shows on CD and send them to my daughter because she lived somewhere where she couldn't hear him, and she loved, to this day, she loves those CDs. But I used to dub Phil Hendry's shows and send them to her in the mail all the time.
Okay, so but if people who haven't heard about Phil, what is it about Phil Hendry that attracts anybody to listen to him? And could what Phil does now? You said podcast, and of course podcasts now rule the day in radio. Could what he does transfer back to terrestrial radio, or is it just not worth the effort?
Well, you're not finding that talent. I don't think it harkens back to, it's basically what Bob and Ray did in the early days of radio, creating characters. The thing that's amazing about Phil is he's got 5, 6 people going at the same time out of this brain that is split in several different directions. So I don't know as that could do it, but I would like to think that there are a lot of talented people, maybe not even near that good, because to me that's the holy grail of good, that could execute that stuff. Maybe you'd have to go to XM Sirius or something like that. I don't know if AM radio is so far entrenched in the crap they do now that they would even consider trying something different like that. But I would like.
If I may, what you're saying comes again to an issue about demographics. Nobody young, nobody any advertiser wants to advertise to is listening to an AM radio. They might listen to FM, and I'd be surprised by that. What are they doing? Podcast, as you said, Dave. they're listening online. If they're listening to anything that's online, we have so many people doing so much stuff online that everything anybody wants, certainly of a younger, and I don't mean that young, I mean 40s, 30s down, they're getting it on the computer these days. And I think that's another issue that why AM is really on the ropes, and Lord knows where it's going to be 10 years from now.
So if we put all this together then, the fact that there simply is nothing creative on AM radio anymore. There isn't. There really isn't. It is syndicated radio at best because management doesn't want to pay for anything. They're under contract. They take the shows for free, and they make a few bucks off it. And a lot of the syndicated shows are the same drivel over and over again. You can, if you want, you can travel from city to city and state to state and hear the same stuff. I want to say that Dan Patrick, for instance, does a really good show that includes sports. But most of it is the same over and over again. There's nothing local. So having said all that, can all four of us shake our heads and agree that AM radio's dead? I mean, really, there's no reason to worry about it, no reason to talk about it, walk away from it, and just put an RIP stake in its heart once and for all.
I would say I'll make a confession. I still have my ham radio license, and I think ham radio is one of the coolest hobbies that you can have. But like AM radio, I don't think I'm going to be surrounded by a bunch of people that are going to listen to me like typing out Morse code in my garage, So I think.
Yeah, you're really showing your age here, Caprito. Let's stop right there, okay? You're going overboard.
Jeez.
Chris, what do you think? Just
God.
put a stake in AM radio. Let's stop talking about it once and for all.
I mean, I hate to be, that negative, but yeah, I think that's the case. I think AM is dead, and I love AM radio. I mean, it's magic to me because of what I grew up around. But yeah, I think you can safely say AM radio, as far as being a viable source of anything creative or exciting, is kaput.
Dave, Corey, and I think those are the key words, exciting or creative. That's the point, because certainly you have people such as the sports talkers and the syndicated news talkers and the right-wing talkers and the left-wing talkers who all make money off it. But when it comes to real creativity and really being fun, DOA?
I think there are some little glimmers of hope because there are a couple of sportscasters in our market that seem to understand that when guys get together to talk sports isn't the only thing they talk about. So you can see them start to drift off into guy talk, which to me is a lot more listenable than continuous sports talk. It's what guys do when they get together. You're sitting around with a bunch of guys drinking beers or whatever. It's not all about statistics and sports, and it takes off on different tangents. So,
well, but I think, I'm gonna mildly disagree with you here on this point, because as a guy who's done sports talk his whole life, all right, I understand what you're talking about, and now you're talking about another facet of the industry which we could spend an hour or two on, which is guy talk radio, which to me is offensive in many ways, because I
wouldn't listen to it.
Well, we have people in this market in South Florida and in other places who take it too far, and I will tell you about the day that I was flipping the dial and went to AM Talk Radio in South Florida and went to one of the stations which had a local show at the time. I don't even know if they still have it in the afternoons. It was two guys sitting at a convention in Miami Beach, and this was the Rough Trade Sex Convention for sex toys in Miami, and they had a prostitute that they were, and they were flat out, they said that she was a prostitute, and they were talking about boys and girls, men and women's sex toys on the air and this is a sports talk station. Hey, look, I'm not a prude by any means. But to me, that's ridiculous. Where are you going with this? Because, and not only that, I'll tell you that a lot of this guy talk radio, it drifts off into absolute screaming nonsense where all they want to do is yell at each other about, well, my wife did this and my kids did that. It's not interesting, Dave. I mean, maybe if you took sports and made it creative with the guy talk, but these people who just blow things off and decide to talk about things, I can't get interested.
Well, this is where management comes in too. And if if you don't have that kind of direction given to you, then that's what it's going to evolve into. And again, it goes back to what I was talking about. If you've got bits, make sure that they have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And that's what I hear so many times is this could be really good, but it starts off with this is National Wiener Day or something like that, and then just goes on forever and ever and ever without any kind of punchline. They have little punchlines that might work. They keep trying those, and then they keep going for another 2 minutes and try to find another one. So yeah, it's like, again, this is theater. And you need somebody, you have a program director, and that is the job of the program director. Say, let's listen to what you did. That was just garbage. You were searching for the elusive punchline, and that's not how it goes. And you missed it. I think that it's laziness too, because they think there's no show prep that's involved. They just come in and do the innuendos and whatever. But with direction, it could work,
But again, what you're talking about is management who gives a damn.
Mm-hmm.
And knows what it's doing.
And with that, we end Chapter 1 in this special episode of Who or What Killed Radio. Chapters 2 and 3 are now available on YouTube and also on audio podcast. Look them up, check them out, get the whole story. Stand by. You'll find out here in just a few seconds how you can get a hold of us right here on The Man in the Arena. Don't forget, episodes 2 and 3 on YouTube and in podcast form. So until we see you there, I'm Ed Berliner. Rock on, true believers. For story ideas, comments, start some interesting debates, or just get in touch, join me on social media at Berliner Speaks on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Also join me on LinkedIn for business and also sponsorship discussions. There you can search out Ed Berliner. A reminder that all of our episodes on Man in the Arena are available on YouTube. Just go to welcometothearena.com. Every episode of Man in the Arena is also available on audio podcast on all of the major platforms. This has been a presentation of Entourage Management, LLC and Entourage Media.